Hey everyone, it's George Couros, and welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast solo edition. It is July 4th when I'm recording this, and I just think what's interesting about July 4th is that it is actually the anniversary of when I arrived into the United States to live here full time, and it is the 2-year anniversary. And before I get into the podcast today, I want to share a little short message about what I was thinking about on my run. And I'll actually connect one of the things I'm trying to do this year is build a running community of educators, not only connecting online, but offline in person. And hopefully at some events, conferences, we can start building that endurance community. Endurance, I don't know. You get it. So I was thinking about this today is my life has changed significantly, partially because I've moved to the United States. I've actually spent less time on the road speaking as much as I ever have, but I travel quite a bit less. And that was one of the reasons that I thought it was really important to move here. But it's not only that it's changed because I moved to the US, it's changed because I've done things with the move and how I've thought differently about this. And what I talked about on my run today, in my reflection, it was a short little 1-minute reflection, was that I always swore if I moved to a warm climate that was warm all year, I would run all the time. Not necessarily every day, but I would run all the time. This would be something that was really important to me. And I am very proud to say this. I run all the time. I love running. It is a great way to explore. I'm learning a lot about the community I live in still to this day because I use running as a way to explore, just kind of go off. And it's a beautiful way. As someone who travels for work, one of the best ways to see a city is to run around it. Because I'm really slow. That's probably partly why when you drive, everything's fast and slow. It's a beautiful way to see it. And so what I talked about is in that little 1-minute reflection, many people are starting new jobs, new opportunities. I've noticed this July 1st for many people in education. They're starting new administration roles. They're going to new school districts. And I love the opportunity to, and I say this is something that I wrote in Innovators Mindset, is that change is an opportunity to do something amazing. And so you get this change and we see this door opening for us. But the reality of it is that if you don't kind of walk through the door and do something when you're there, it doesn't matter the change that happens. So change can happen to you, but it doesn't mean it will happen and benefit you. That's up to you. So I just wanted to remind you of that as you're thinking about what's going on this year, that, yeah, you might have some significant changes, but if you don't do anything with that change, it's not going to really matter. You might actually end up being worse off than before if you don't do something with it. So I always kind of think that there's little things I've done, whether it's really kind of thinking about my routine. I know it seems like a little thing, but it's a huge thing. I walk my dogs every morning, every night, and it is one of the best things I not only do for me, but for them as well. They get good exercise, but it's a really great way for me to start off the day with some sunlight, kind of gather my thoughts, and just kind of meditate and be on my own. So I never did that before when I lived in Canada. I would just let my dogs out, and I think that's little things like that are kind of adding up and really benefiting me. And I didn't want to just come here and do Canada things in my new home. I wanted to say like, hey, what opportunities are here that I wasn't really doing when I moved? I've made way more personal connections. I've made way more connections with people outside of education in the community because I was very intentional about doing that. A good friend of mine, he knows everyone. And I remember him saying to me, how do you know everyone? And he said, because when I moved here, I made it my business to get to know everybody, as many people as possible. And I was like, I love that. So I thought about that, and I've tried to do that myself. I've tried to make those personal connections in a way that honestly I wasn't doing before. And I'm not saying like I hate living in Canada, but maybe I was just kind of in a rut, in a routine that I was used to. So when my routine was changed, I changed along with it. So just something to think about. And that one sentence my friend said is actually what I'm going to talk about today. I wrote an email, and you can see the link to the original email. I kind of like doing this, kind of looking back some of my old emails. And you can subscribe to my email list. You'll not only see a link to this email, and I'm not reading it word for word. I'm just seeing the sense and kind of talking about it, but you'll kind of get a synopsis of what I'm talking about today. But I would love for you to subscribe. It's a great way. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And I just kind of share some thoughts, try to make it really short and succinct, but I would love for you to be a part of this community, and little opportunities come up, for things like the Endurance community, just a way to connect, and there's like no obligation. It just comes to your email inbox. But this week, I just want to do a quick podcast, and what I titled this was basically 3 sentences that changed my trajectory forever. So there's stories connected to each one of these, but they were just simply a sentence or a statement that was made to me that in the moment changed everything, totally altered my trajectory, literally in the moment. And part of it is that can happen. And I guarantee you, if you really think about it, if you think about it specifically, there's probably little moments in your life, whether it's an interaction, something that you might not think much of right now, but if you really look back at it, you'll realize it's changed you forever. And you had to be ready to do it, and you had to do something with that information. It wasn't just, people don't just say things and then it changes your life. People might say things and then you decide to change your life because of what they said. And so these are kind of those moments for me. And so I want to share the sentence. I'm actually going to just read the sentence, but see if I can remember the story. And you can tell if I can't remember the story, it didn't really change my life. But this is the first one I want to share with you. And this is the statement. These kids love you, whether you are a good role model or not. They will follow your lead. So I very specifically remember, I'll remember all of these, no problem. I was coaching basketball, and I love basketball so much. You know this. People hate when I talk about basketball. It's part of who I am. And I remember actually when I got a job, I wanted to coach high school basketball. And the principal said to me this very early on in my career. He said, it kind of seems like you're more interested in coaching basketball and teaching. I'm like, you're not wrong. But they were so desperate they took me. So, and in Canada, it's very different. You don't get paid to coach or anything like that. It's totally volunteer. But I always loved coaching. And I love basketball. I grew up watching it. And, you grow up watching the NBA. And one of the things you see continuously is coaches totally yelling. Even when I grew up, not just yelling, they were throwing chairs. It was just like a lot. So when I became a coach, I thought that's kind of part of my job. And so I started coaching high school boys basketball. And I don't know if I'd say I'd yell at the refs, but I would get on them, quite hard. And then I would actually just keep going. But I always kind of knew a limit. If you get a technical foul, that can actually hurt your team. So I kind of would push it to a point where I knew I wouldn't get a technical, but I would be kind of annoying. And probably about 4 games in, I noticed that my team was kind of doing the same thing, but they're younger. They didn't know the limits. So they'd start yelling at the refs. They would get technical fouls that would hurt the team. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why would you yell at the ref? Right. Being young and naive at this time myself. And I remember one of the referees in the game, I actually don't know his name and I wish I did, but he coached against me in football. So we kind of had some familiarity with each other. And I kind of was like pushing a limit. And I remember there was a stoppage in the game. I can actually visualize the gym. Like it was such an important moment to me. And I remember him coming over to me, and I'm not going to say the statement word for word, but this is kind of what he said to me. He looked at me and said, it's obvious these kids love you. Like you can totally tell. And you're yelling at me, you're constantly getting on me. And no matter if you do that or not, they're going to follow your lead. So like, what kind of person do you want them to become? And I realized, they're yelling at the refs because I'm yelling at the refs, right? They're following me because they honestly look up to me, right? I was a coach, and, with that, comes some responsibility. And I'll tell you, in that moment, it wasn't like I thought about it and I like slowly considered advice. I was like, it just like hit me super hard. And I realized that, that's not a good example. I shouldn't be doing this. So I actually never yelled at a ref again after that. Now, I will say I would talk to them. I might challenge them, and not in a mean way or anything, but I'd be very thoughtful of this. And interestingly enough, I actually became a referee. And I will tell you that the coaches that constantly yelled all the time, you just learn to ignore them. The more you yelled, the more I wouldn't listen to you. Yet the coaches that rarely spoke, when they did, you listened because you're like, oh, I must have screwed up if they're saying something, right? And that's something that I not only, and you think about, like, this guy talks about basketball all the time. Think about this in life, right? A lot of people that just constantly like go on and on and on, you ignore. But the people that rarely say something, when they do, it's like, why is that person saying something now? It's obviously it holds some weight. So I think that was a really important moment for me, not only like in, coaching basketball, but in life, right? I've limited my social media use because I feel like we always talk about the importance of student voice, but we don't talk enough about the importance of listening, the importance of like sitting back and, not just having to have a say on everything. It's important just to be thoughtful of, when we talk, because when we talk, how we talk is actually as important as what we say. So just something to consider. This actually leads to the second one. I won't read the quote to you right away, but in my first couple of years of teaching, I was really stressed. I was really struggling and, young, taking everything very personally. Kids were, if they were acting up, it's because I was a bad teacher or because they're a bad kid, blah, 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 everything. And so I remember going home day after day after day and just being stressed and so much crying in the first couple of years. And then we had a speaker come in to an event for our opening day. And I don't remember like really anything this gentleman said, but I do remember one thing he said. And I think I don't remember what he said because of how much weight the one thing he said. And it was just a moment frozen in time. He said, never let an 8-year-old ruin your day. I was like, oh my God, that's totally me. Like, I'm like going home crying because like grade 4 kids are calling me poo-poo head sometimes. And I was just getting really worked up about it. And that really kind of helped me put in perspective some of the things that I was reacting to. And it wasn't that, just understand this. I don't think kids should be disrespectful. I don't think they should be rude. But a lot of times when we're rude to people, it's not strangers. It's the people we actually care about most. It's the people we're most comfortable with. Think about this in relationships. Think about this in your family life. And so a lot of times they were hard or rude to me because they knew I'd still be there and I cared. And we had built that relationship. But a lot of times some of their disrespect wasn't me, toward me. It was towards someone, but I was just there. And so I started kind of disconnecting that, like I kind of disassociating that. And again, I am very old school on my expectations for, student behavior, on how we treat each other. That's really important to me. I'm not like, I don't want kids calling me George. Maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy, which is the first time fuddy-duddy has ever been said on my podcast. Maybe I'm that guy, and I'm okay with that. I remember a superintendent I met. Her name is Dr. Tiffany Spicer, and I met her daughter, and her daughter was so amazingly polite that I remember my kids got in trouble. I was like, you need to be more like that. So it says a lot to me when kids are respectful and appreciative. But it was also kind of understanding that I was taking a lot of things personally that were not personally directed toward me. And so that was an important moment for me in my life, was thinking about sometimes we get we take everything personal in this work, but it's actually just something coming at you. And it's, I feel when you kind of disassociate that, you kind of get into that Trevor Moawad ability to, act neutral. Like you kind of say like, hey, that's actually not correct, proper how you're referring to me, things like that. But you don't necessarily get an emotional, like get emotionally upset because of what was said. So that was I remember that moment. I remember sitting there. I was like, oh my God, that's totally me. That's totally me. And so the last one, this quote: "Don't take criticism from someone that you wouldn't take, or don't take criticism from someone that you wouldn't want their advice." This is I remember social media. Some people are being teachers, which I was kind of like seriously, like you teach kids and like this is how you talk online. It's probably, if you're talking this publicly, I don't know if I feel comfortable how you talk to students. So, and that's being honest, right? And so people attacking me that I don't know and sharing really negative stuff on social media, and it was just really, really rude. And I was really upset about it, and I was bothered by it, and it was like overwhelming. And to think, so and I just had a conversation with this about someone, I think it was Brad Critchfield. My personal belief is I actually treat everyone on social media like they're going through something, like something bad's happening in their life, whether it is or not. Because if you act that way, you're always cognizant of other people. We always talk about, hey, people need to get a thick skin. And I'm like, maybe we should be talking about just being a nicer person, right? Just being more thoughtful instead of like, hey, you should get a thicker skin to me being a jerk. That's not good. It's like, I think it's the wrong place to kind of focus. So anyways, I was getting upset about this, and I didn't know these people. And here's the thing, they didn't know me. So we never connection. And I remember talking to Joe Sanfilippo. I was texting him, like saying, like I'm really upset about this. And he said to me, he texted me on the plane. He said, "Well, my wife kind of shared this, and this is like his wife didn't make this up, but she probably heard it, like, because this is like shared all over now. I see it all the time. It's kind of like when you get a car, you see that car everywhere. But I've seen this quote everywhere, and basically he said, yeah, my wife told me this, that like don't take criticism from someone that you wouldn't want their advice. And I was thinking, like, you know, the people that are talking to me, I don't want to be like them. I have no interest I'm not seeking out their advice. And it's not that you can't take criticism from strangers and things like that, but you know, or you can't be challenged on your ideas. And I'm not, by the way, this is really important to acknowledge, I don't think these are bad people either, right? And I don't think, that was what they were doing to me that day. And like, they're probably loved by tons of people, and that's great. But I didn't really was interested in what they're saying, because I don't really care what they're saying. I would never go out and ask them for their advice. And so why am I getting so upset about their criticism? And the other thing that's kind of interesting about this too, the opposite is kind of true. Like, you also necessarily, like, that's such easy advice to take. Like, don't take criticism from somebody you want to take advice from. That's awesome. That's great advice. Easy, because it's like really helps us deal with negative stuff. But the opposite is true. Like, you know, don't like get caught up in praise from strangers either. Like, you know, I think that's a really important thing too, is that we say it on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, oh, look at all these people that, you know, who don't know me, who are like saying, oh, awesome I am. They don't know if I'm awesome. There's none of that too, right? It's actually the people that you connected with. Those are the people, you know, who will push you, but you know, God have your back, and they live a life that you think you would want to lead. And, you know, I go out, I seek advice from strangers that do things that I wish I could do. I can't honestly say that live lives that I want to lead, because I don't know what their life looks like, but they might have this ability, or, you know, I really like to talk to people that I think are incredible speakers and learn from them, like stuff that they're doing, because I want to learn that technique. Instead of getting jealous of them, I would say, okay, what is it that they do that I would want to do? And why not try to aspire to that? So I just remember, you know, I was getting really caught up in that, not only in the negative, but in the positive as well. So I just really kind of think about, who is the source this is coming from? Is this someone I aspire to be like? And how is that beneficial? So those three quotes really resonated with me, and really kind of like, I use it. It's not like they're not like good quotes. They're quotes that I heard them and something clicked. So just something clicked in me in that day. And so I guess I share this with you all because I didn't want to just share the stories from them, but maybe you have those moments in your life too. And to kind of think about that. So maybe, you know, write it. I'd love to, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, or you're listening to this, go over to YouTube, write in the comments, like, what's a moment or a sentence that changed your life? I'd love to hear that from now. But I'll give you one more that's like a bonus one. And it's this one. Sometimes I get really upset about things and I'm really bothered in the moment. I try to kind of, I know that sounds weird, kind of step out of my body. Just kind of take a step back and I ask myself, like, will this matter like 5 years from now? Like, what I'm really bothered by and kind of seems like the end of the world, in 5 years, will this matter? And 99% of the time it won't, right? You'll like even if you 5 weeks will bug you, 5 days. Some of the stuff that you get, not you as in George, because I'm looking at myself on the screen here. Some of the things I get really upset about, I've learned that I'm like, yeah, like in 2 days, I won't even care. So if I'm not going to care in 2 days, why do I even care right now? And so I think it just gives me perspective. I'm really trying to embrace that Trevor Moawad idea of neutral thinking. Like, and I'm not saying situations aren't bad or anything like that, but like, okay, so this is probably not going to bug me, but can I figure this out right now? What can I actually do with this moment to make my life better? So that idea of like, will this moment matter 5 years from now? And you can kind of pull it back 5 weeks, 5 days. And if it doesn't, typically it's an easier way to deal with things. So that's kind of something I've really kind of learned over the last couple of years. Anyways, I want to share those 3 quotes with you. I've been trying to do some more, some of these like solo podcasts. They seem to connect with people in a different way. I love talking to guests, but it's just a good way for me to reflect, kind of talk some things out, share some ideas, and to really kind of push my own learning. One of the things I'm really passionate about is I don't speak at events unless I've either written the idea before or I've talked about it in a podcast, because it helps me kind of articulate and really kind of think deeply about it. I don't want to just say things for the sake of saying things. I really want some thought behind why I'm saying that and why it matters. So thanks for being here to be a part of that process. It really, really matters to me that you're here to do that. And I appreciate your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for all you do. Take care.